You know, we're blessed to have a group like that to lead us in worship every Sunday, and sometimes even just the messages that come from the lyrics is all we need for the day, and I'm just adding. You know what I mean? Like there was some good stuff there, and so we are right now today. We're going to finish Matthew chapter 5. All right? Yeah, you can clap for that. I mean, I don't know how long we've been doing it. But yeah, we started at Matthew 1 in January, and we're going to finish up Matthew 5 today. Now, I thought about doing it last week because I thought that the scriptures were pretty close together. We talked about nonviolent resistance, right, last week, and how to use that in our own lives. And I was like, if Matthew separated them, I thought, we're just going to separate them, and we'll handle this one today. And I'm really glad we did because there was actually a lot in this section. Now, the other thing, so what I'm trying to do with this series, hopefully, is that each sermon kind of at least does fine on its own, right? But also there's kind of an overarching theme that you can pick up on. And one of the things I want you to see as we're going through Matthew is his brilliance. As he writes this, the way that he is almost, because it's not just that he wrote it down. Like, you can tell when you read it that there's time. It's almost artistic, the way that he wrote it, right? If you remember, when we first were getting into the Sermon on the Mount, we talked about how Matthew is trying to connect Jesus with Moses, right? And that what we saw was, remember Moses, if you know your Old Testament, Moses comes out of Egypt, and he goes into the wilderness, right? And then he goes up onto the mountain and brings down the Ten Commandments, right? And so what we see in Matthew is he shows us Jesus, right, coming out of Egypt as a child, right, then going into the wilderness where he's tempted, right, and then going up onto this mountain and bringing us the commands, right? So you see how he's interweaving these we call them Easter eggs now, right? If you know some of the Marvel movies, there's like these little things that not everyone catches. So if you're Jewish, you would catch this stuff, right? And so that there's just something beautiful about what he's doing with the way he writes. So there's a lot of stories about loving your enemies. But usually when you tell those stories, there's kind of like a wow moment at the end, right? It's whether it was parents forgiving someone that harmed their children in court, or even when you get into the Old Testament stuff, like Joseph, where Joseph, I mean, everyone was treating him poorly, it seemed like, and he ends up running Egypt and saving Israel, right? Or you can go, I think even there was Paul and Silas in the New Testament. Paul and Silas are in prison, and the gates swing open, and the guard was about to kill himself because they were going to escape, and so Paul and Silas stayed in the cell so that he wouldn't kill himself. He said, "Hey, we're here. Don't hurt yourself." And he ends up he and his whole family get baptized, right? So there's usually, when you tell these stories, there's usually kind of these all moments. And the thing about what Jesus has been telling us in the sermon, in this section where he goes, you have heard, but I say, there hasn't been it's like, where's the motive? It's like, give me, like, what's the prize, right? What's the wow, I'm glad I did this, right? It's like, I'm always kind of looking for that, but Jesus hasn't given us necessarily a reason other than I said so, right? And so we're understanding that this is the way that we've been shown to live inside this kind of upside-down kingdom, a world that we're told to act differently. And so I titled the sermon, Don't Do the Human Thing. Don't do the human thing. So let's pick up Matthew chapter 5, verse 43. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies. So the interesting thing about this specific passage, we've had all these different things that Jesus said you have heard, but this one, and we've gone into the Old Testament, right, and kind of looked at how it was said. Like we looked at some of the marriage stuff. We looked at the eye for an eye stuff, a couple weeks ago. This one isn't actually in there, right? There isn't actually an Old Testament passage that says, hate your enemies. But what it is actually, I think Jesus is kind of speaking to an ethos, kind of a culture of course we're going to hate our enemies. Right? If you look at Israel's history, ancient Israel's history, right? It's like, well, yeah, look at all the conquests. Look at all what they did. It's like, of course we're supposed to hate our enemies. In fact, that's kind of what enemy is. Like, it's like if I love my enemy, they're not even, like, that's not the definition. Like, it doesn't work, Jesus. Like, it's like you have to hate your enemy. That's what hate is. That's what enemies are. Otherwise, they'd be my friend. And so Jesus, I think what was really interesting about this passage is that he actually encapsulates all of these commands that he's given us, right? It's not just like he's actually, you can look back and go, actually all of these were about loving your enemy, right? It's like, are you angry with your brother? Love him, right? Do you want to get divorced for a dumb reason? Like, love your spouse, right? Or has someone insulted you? Has someone sued you? Has someone used you? Love them, right? And so he's been giving us examples this whole time of what it is like to love an enemy. Love someone that you don't feel like loving. And so love isn't fuzzy feelings, right? Right? Love, when Ashley and I were going through some hard times probably 6 years ago, we were close to divorce, and we got a marriage coach. Like we had tried a lot of things. We had tried counseling. We had tried a lot of these different things. And so we ended up with a marriage coach, and so one of the things was and I did not feel love for my wife, and this is not news to her. She's not surprised by me saying this, right? I would never do that, right? I was vocal about it, and we talked a lot about it, and I did not feel that. And so one of the things our coach said was, he asked Ashley, he said, what is something Karsten could do to show love to you? And so it's something that he would do and could do, right? There's a lot of things we would want someone to do, right? But it's like, what would he do and could he do? And so one of the things that we decided was every night before bed, we'd say, I love you, and I'd give you a kiss on the forehead. And then every morning before I would go to work, I would kiss you on the forehead and say, I love you, right? And so that seems very easy. But it wasn't easy for me, because I felt like I wasn't being genuine, I wasn't being honest, right? But I kept doing the thing because it's what she wanted. So I'm loving her in that way, even though I didn't feel it. In fact, we still do this. 6, 7 years, 6 years, something like that. Even if we're irritated with each other, right? When you go to bed and your backs are turned, right? Married people know, right? Your backs are turned to each other, right? And it's like, well, wait, you still forgot, right? It's like, this is a thing that we do. But what was so great was when my depression lifted, and when all of that fog had gone away, I was so glad that I was loving my wife, even when I didn't feel love. You tracking? Right? Love is not a feeling. So, if you're familiar with Dietrich Bonhoeffer, right? Yeah, right. He was a German pastor, anti-Nazi double agent. All right, who was trying to assassinate Hitler. He didn't. He was arrested, and he was eventually hanged. Right, but you can actually. He wrote a lot of letters home, and they actually made him into a collection, letters and papers from prison. He writes about the way that he treated the guards. He writes about the way that he would offer them counseling, right? He would offer them pastoral care, right? He was doing all of these things to the people that were going to kill him, like knew he was not making it out. They're going to kill you. And he's still treating them as if they have the image of God on them, like that they deserve to be loved. That's the way that he's treating them. Now, try to wrap your head around trying to assassinate a person and then also loving loving the people that are guarding you. Like you're not going to wrap your head around that. But this is the kind of thing, because he had no use. There was no wow moment, right? There was no aha, this is going to work out. There's none of that, right? It ended badly for him, but he still chose love. And that's, I think, what we're getting into. You can't look for the wow. You can't look for the aha. But it's doing what we're called to do. And so I came up, so I like this rule. I saw it, and this was, like I said, this is the title of the sermon. It was, how do I love? How do I love? How do I love my enemy? And I thought the simplest thing that we could remember, and I saw in some of my studies, was don't do the human thing. Don't do the human thing, because that's what, and that's really what Jesus has been telling us the whole time. Right? That's what it means to be in an upside-down kingdom. It means that this is the way that the world would respond. This is the way that the world would act. This is the way you want to react. This is the way this is what makes you feel good. Right? And he's going, no, I want you to act differently. I want you to not do the human thing. Like John 13:35 tells us that by this, everyone, who? You guys, everyone. Well, I normally don't do this, but I feel like we got to do. Who? Everyone. Yes, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. Right? So literally, the way that we are seen, the way we evangelize to the world is the way that we love others. And there is no better way to stand out in love than to love people that you don't want to, and for people to see that in you. And we're a pretty tribal people. Would you agree? Especially this time of year, everybody starts to kind of get into their groups, and here's what I struggle with this politics, right? Because the root word, right, is poly, many, and ticks, blood-sucking insects, right? Is that? No, that's this is what I mean. It's like, so how far can we take jokes when we're talking about someone that we would consider an enemy? When's it okay to have a laugh, and when does it move towards cruelty? And I don't think that I can define that line. Right? I don't think, but I wonder if you think these same things. Like, I wonder sometimes with the jokes and with the the things we send to each other in group messages. It's like, where is the line? And the thing is, you have to know, you have to decide where the line is, right? But there was a time last year. It was probably one of my third classes in seminary, and someone in a high position, we'll say, right? Someone in a high position came into class and was talking about politics, and was talking about a certain politician that she said did not deserve his name to be uttered. And I thought, in Facebook, on Instagram, Twitter, text messages, but in seminary. I thought in seminary, someone that was a leader, to say that a person isn't valuable. Because when you take someone's name, I mean, when someone says your name wrong, I mean, we feel name. Name is something to us, right? And to take value from someone, regardless of how you feel about them, I thought, there's the line. I thought, there's a line, right? And because listen, I thought, just like, this person would have said Hitler's name, would have said Mao's name, would have said Osama bin Laden, but not this politician's name. And I thought, now I'm not using the name just because I don't, not because of disrespect, but because names are, it could be Abraham Lincoln. It could be, who knows who we're talking about, right? But the idea the idea that someone's not valued, especially, because listen, and I'll move on, we're being watched. That's what the John passage says. We're being watched. People will know us by the way that we love our enemies. Our children are watching us, right? Our non-Christians are watching us. People that said, I might go back to church, are watching us. And so we ought to live in a way that we represent Christ, because we do. Like it or not, we represent Jesus in all that we say and do. You tracking? All right, good. Now there was a saying that was, you've heard the saying, love the sinner, hate the sin. You've heard this, right? Now we've kind of pushed back against that, because a lot of people were using that against our queer brothers and sisters to say that what they were doing was wrong, but we're going to love you. And so for them, that was like saying, how can you love me but hate me, because that's who I am, right? And so we've said that we don't believe that here. But the saying works if what someone's doing is wrong. And that's kind of what was happening here. Like, you don't have to love what someone's doing, what a politician's doing, what this side or that side's doing. You don't have to love what they're doing. But you do have to treat them like they have the image of God, the Imago Dei, printed on their forehead. When you look at them, you see a child of God. All right, let's keep going. Matthew 5, 43 and 44. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. Now, there's a lot of ways you could pray for your enemies. There's a couple ways you shouldn't. All right? There's a couple ways you shouldn't. And so David, listen, in Psalms, I think it's, in Psalms alone, enemy is used 68 times. Now, the next book closest is Deuteronomy with 21. All right, so it's a lot. There's a lot of enemy talk in Psalms. And so I'm going to read to you a psalm that you shouldn't pray. You with me? All right. Psalm 109, this is David, verse 6. Appoint someone evil to oppose my enemy. Let an accuser stand at his right hand. When he is tried, let him be found guilty, and may his prayers condemn him. It's like, okay, maybe it's not too bad, right? May his days be few. May another take his place of leadership. Okay, may his children be fatherless and his wife a widow. Like, it's getting a little extreme. May his children be wandering beggars. May they be driven from their ruined homes. May a creditor seize all this stuff. Like, you're wishing bad credit now. Like, this is, may strangers plunder the fruits of his labor. May no one extend kindness to him or take pity on his fatherless children. May his descendants be cut off, their names blotted out from the next generation. May the iniquity of his fathers be remembered before the Lord. May the sin of his mother never be blotted out. It's like, God, remember everything bad his mom did. Like, I just want, you know what I mean? May their sins always remain before the Lord, that he may blot out their name from the earth. That's not the prayer that we're praying, right? That's not, but that's in there. And this is why you understand what I'm talking about, the ethos of hating your enemy. Like, because this is their God. This was Israel's guy, right? This was King David. And so this energy was in there, right? And I think this is what Jesus is speaking to. He's saying, you have heard. You've probably read David. You should hate your enemies. But there are some prayers that we can pray. And it's not always a prayer of, God, would you change them? Right? Because one of David's prayers I do like was Psalm 51, verse 10. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a steadfast spirit within me. Right? It's like, hey, maybe before I pray that person's changed, maybe I make sure that I'm not wrong, that I'm not actually the enemy, that I'm not actually the bad guy, right? I mean, we talked a lot about this when we're in conflict, and and you're having conflict with each other, to first go back and see what you did wrong, right? Step away from the argument, step away from the battle, and say, I need to find something that I did wrong to bring to this, because I know I'm not perfect, right? And so that's it's like God, like, or James 1, right? James 1, 2, or 5. This was like a life verse for me forever. It was, if any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. It's like, God, give me wisdom. Show me, like, just show me how to deal with this person. Show me how to navigate this situation. Show me. Tell me, give me wisdom. And the Bible says, James says, the brother of Jesus says, God answers that prayer. Give me wisdom. And listen, sometimes prayer is the only act of love you can muster up in a moment. Right? When you're really charged. Like when you're like, I can't even be in a room with that person, or I can't, like, sometimes prayer is the starting point, right? It's like, God, show me how to love them tomorrow, right? Right? It's like maybe I can't do it today, but like, do something, right? Say a prayer, like, pray about your enemy, pray for your enemy, because here's the thing too, when you begin to pray for someone you don't like, with using their name and consistently praying for that person, you begin to see their soul. You begin to see that they are broken and you are broken, and you see the image of God on them. Not just an enemy, but you see a person that maybe is hurt, right? That maybe is struggling with some things and putting them out on you. It very likely may be that they are the wrong, but you continue to pray for them, and it changes the way you feel about them, and it will make it easier then to love them when you see them. Let's keep going. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor, hate your enemy, but I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that, I think we're going to have a reason, right? We're going to have a reason. So that you may be children of your Father in heaven. For he makes the sun rise on the evil and on the good. He sends rain on the righteous and the unrighteous. It's like, so we finally kind of have a motive. The motive is, it's not change. He's not saying live this way so that people change. He's not saying that. He's not saying live this way even just because I say so. He's saying actually that it's participation, that when you live this way, when you love your enemies, when you love your brother instead of hating, when you love your wife, when you allow people to love that have disrespected you, you're actually participating in the nature of God. Like it's like he's saying you're a part of me because this is what I do. I'm this way, right? It says I send the rain and I send the sun on everybody. The good, the bad, the ugly, they all get it. We all get to participate in some of the basic graces of God. And he says, when you do the same thing, just as God loves indiscriminately, we ought to as well. And when we do, we are like God, right? It's not the human thing. It's the God thing. And so don't do the human thing. Verse 46 says, for if you love those who love you, what reward do you have? Do not even the tax collectors do the same? It's like, that's easy, right? He's like, it's easy to love people that love you and greet people that greet you. That's human stuff. And if you greet only your brothers and sisters, what more are you doing than others? Do not even the Gentiles do the same thing? It's like, Jesus. Come on. The whole idea of an enemy is I don't want to talk to him. Right? Like it's like you're missing the enemy thing, Jesus. Like I don't want to do any of this. It's like you're asking a lot of me, and it's like, there's a reason that blockbuster, like the big blockbuster movies, are usually about a hero destroying an enemy, right? Batman taking on Joker, right? It's Keanu Reeves taking on 1 billion people, right? There's like all these. It's the hero because it does something inside of us, right? It's like that feels good. I want that. I love that, and it's because it's the human thing. But here's one of the cool things about what Jesus is saying here. The greeting, it gets lost in translation because what's the Jewish greeting? Shalom, right? It's shalom. So he's saying when you shalom, like peace be with you, That's how you greet each other. You're saying, peace be with you. It's like, yeah, you tell the people you love, peace be with you, but I want you to tell the people you don't love, peace be with you. And so it's actually a prayer, right? And so Jesus says, pray for your enemy. And he says, you can start with this, shalom. Peace be with you. Like if there's a war inside of you, I want it to be at peace. If there's a war between us, I want it to be at peace. Shalom. That's the greeting. It's like, but we miss that in the greeting piece. It's like, no, it's so much more than just saying hi. It's a prayer. It's peace be with you. And then the last verse, verse 48, says this, and this is an easy one. Be perfect, therefore, as your heavenly Father is perfect. Right? It's like, Jesus, if this wasn't hard enough already, right? Like if you've already given us all this stuff, like all this to do, and then it's like now you want me to be perfect? Perfect. I want to lighten the load for you, okay? The word perfect in the Greek is teleos. And teleos means mature and complete. And so what Jesus is saying, he said, listen, I've given you the rules. I've given you the new commands of how to live life as members of the kingdom. It's not what you're used to. It doesn't feel right. It's not the human thing. But I want you to be mature and complete. And if you live this life, you will be like God. You know, the coolest thing about participating in God's kingdom, that was the sixth beatitude, that was the sixth command of Jesus in this section. It's also the sixth beatitude, right? Is that if you'll love, you'll be like children of God, right? Matthew just does some awesome things. But listen, Romans 5, verse 8. Paul says this to the church in Rome. But God demonstrates his own love for us in this. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. And verse 10 says, for if while we were God's enemies, we were reconciled to him through the death of his son, how much more, having been reconciled, shall we be saved through his life? You see, Jesus doesn't just tell us to do it. He modeled it, right? He said, while you were an enemy, I stood on the cross, arms wide open, and said, forgive them. Father, forgive them, right? That's the love that he's calling us to. And so it's an easy rule to remember. It's not so easy to do, and that's why we have each other to hold us accountable. That's why we have the Holy Spirit to provoke us. But church, don't do the human thing. God bless you.